All right, so AIM 3.5 should be in your books. How did trade unions help the working class regain some power in the industrial society? So today's a little bit note heavy, so I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. So here we go. All right, I'll give you a second here. So the first thing we need to do is we kind of need to revisit the idea of laissez-faire economics. We talked about this in the Enlightenment, but this is the idea that governments should not really play a part in economic function. So French for hands off is laissez-faire. So basically what they're saying is that the only thing that should kind of control economy and economic function are the forces of supply and demand. Laissez-faire economics is a way for the government, is an excuse that the government will use for not getting involved in the mistreatment of workers or poor practices or unsafe or unhygienic conditions, because they say it's not our right to, interfere with economic functions. So all of these owners just continue going about your business. It's not our place to kind of interfere. And the ironic part is that the government decides that they don't want to interfere when it's in their best interest to not interfere, right? So while, under the system of laissez-faire economics, when the workers are being taken advantage of by owners, there's a huge increase in productivity. There's a lot of goods being produced. This is generating a lot of tax revenue for the governments. This is giving them a lot of goods to export and sell elsewhere. And the government is benefiting from this system. So while the government is benefiting from this system, they believe they should stay out of economic function. But we'll see if they change their minds if things start kind of taking a turn for them. Let's see. All right. I'll give you a second. All right. So here's in general the way these trade unions work, okay? If there's, let's say a factory can employ 100 factory workers, okay? And let's say there are thousands upon thousands of people that are able to do this job in the factory, but the factory only has room for 100 people. So what they do is the factory offers very, very low wages. So the pay is very, very little. And the idea behind that is if the factory workers that are working there don't like it, they can leave. And there's thousands upon thousands of other people that will be interested in taking this job for the wages that are being offered. So this is how industrial capitalism has worked for a long time. There are more workers than there is work. Okay, so the idea is that someone out there will be desperate enough for this job and they will take this job for the low pay that is being offered. So the idea behind a trade union is that all of the factory workers, the ones that currently have jobs in the factories and the ones that don't, all band together and kind of take a stand together, right? Because the owner's system only works if there are workers out there that are willing to take these low wages. Well, if all of the workers kind of band together and agree that we will not take this job for any less than $10 an hour, I'm using fake numbers here, right? That means the owner has no choice but to pay that because no one will take the job for less. And this kind of puts a monkey wrench into this whole system. Now, like we've been talking about for the last few days, the idea here is that because it's owners versus workers, and that's the general concept of industrial capitalism, the more the owners have to pay workers, the less profit they keep for themselves. So this arrangement where workers band together in what's called a trade union, this doesn't sit well with the owners because now they're paying more than they have to for labor and it's cutting into their profit. Okay. And when this happens, it starts to cut into productivity. And when you start cutting into productivity, that's when the government starts to get mad. Now, in the very last slide, we just talked about how the government believed that they should be staying out of economic functions and how work kind of how things work in factories. Well, that's because productivity is very high, right? But the beginning of trade unions cuts into productivity and profit. And not surprisingly, the government changes its tune as far as whether or not it should be involved. And now they decide this is not good for business. The government will now intervene and the government will prevent collective action. In US history, you guys should have learned about a group called the Pinkertons, who were strike busters and strike breakers, they call them. But in general, these are government officials and police forces that come in and force people back to work, basically, like literally at gunpoint. So, you know, when things are going well, the government says, okay, we should stay out of everything. You know, when they have an opportunity to step in and protect the worker, they won't do that. They say we stay out of economics. But when the advantage turns to the worker with the advent of trade unions, magically the government changes their tune and says, okay, now we need to step in and protect the owners. And the hypocrisy is kind of is laid very bare here. All right, I'll give you a second here. So while you finish up, this is basically all the things that we just said. So the government does not want these unions to become a thing. And they make basically unionizing illegal and punishable by jail. Even though it's illegal, a lot of the workers continue to kind of get organized and unionize anyway. It's because this is their only tool to fight back against the inequities that have been thrust upon them by the owning class. Eventually, this practice spreads to unskilled workers and skilled workers alike. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to put the owners in a position to now they can make demands. If you don't provide a clean working environment, shorter working hours, eliminate child labor, give us all raises, give us off on holidays, make the work week shorter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't do all these things that we demand, we don't work. And if everyone that can work agrees to kind of join in that movement, the owners don't have much of a choice. And that's the general idea. This is how it works. So these early trade unions have some significant benefits. And this is the last slide. You're just going to have to write down all these kind of impacts of the trade union so you can kind of make a note of, all of the advances that they lead to.